Hello and welcome to everyone gathered in this space, everyone watching and listening online. It's good to be back with you this Sunday after a week off last week. Heather and I had a really good time celebrating our 25th anniversary last week, and we love that good buddy Jeff Walling was able to be here and fill in for me, and I know you enjoyed hearing from him. Today we are continuing in our series from Ecclesiastes, in which we are wrestling with the words of the teacher. And today we are going to read quite a few words from the teacher, but they're all on topic, and he has a lot to say about today's topic. The teacher is a careful observer of life. Some might say he's more than that. He's an annoying complainer about life. Or even worse, he is an entitled, whining narcissist who is unhappy with his life. And whatever he is, he's not shy about voicing what bothers him about the way the world works. And if you read through Ecclesiastes, one of the first things you will notice is that nothing bothers the teacher more than death. No matter what he's talking about, and no matter when it seems like, he's hitting a high point, it's beginning to get positive. He's got some helpful advice to pass on, and then he says, but death. He traces all of his complaints about life back to death, this inevitable, universal experience. For example, here's some of what bothers the teacher about death. In chapter 2, verse 13, he says that I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, so they can navigate life, while the fool walks in darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. And what fate is that? Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. So the teacher sees death negating the benefits of wisdom. And he spent his whole life trying to be as wise as he possibly can. And he acknowledges it's better to be wise than a fool. It's better for yourself. It's better for the world. Better to be wise than foolish. But he also realizes that all wisdom does is help him live just a little bit longer than the fool. But then he too dies just like the fool does. And even worse, enough time passes, he realizes that he, as this wise teacher, will be forgotten in death, just like the fool. And so he sees no long-term gain to being wise, because in the long run, the wise and the foolish have the exact same fate. Everybody dies. And he's just getting started, because he continues in verse 18 in chapter 2. He says, so I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. He does have a little bit of a sense of humor. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. I'm not sure if he's talking about his kids. If we go back there, I don't know if he's talking about his kids, who his kids will marry. Maybe the government. Maybe whoever the government will give his estate to. All he knows is that when he dies, he loses control of what was his. And this is obviously before lawyers begin to specialize in estate planning. He said, "Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless or vaporous. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun." Why am I doing this? He says, "For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it, who has not worked for it, who has not earned it, who does not deserve it. This too is vaporous and a great misfortune." It says, not only does death negate the benefits of wisdom, but it also spoils the fruit of my labor. Because when I die, I must give it all up. It will be given to someone else, and who knows whether or not that person will be a fool. A young man asked an old man how he had acquired his great fortune. The old man leaned back behind his huge desk and says, "Well, let me tell you the story. I was a little older than you were. Times were hard, and I was down to my last nickel. And with that nickel, one day I bought an apple. And I polished that apple all day long. And at the end of the day, I sold that shiny apple for a dime. And the next day, I bought 2 apples. And all day long, I polished those 2 apples. And at the end of the day, I sold those 2 shiny apples for 20 cents. He said, "Young man, I worked that system and worked it until I had acquired a small fortune of $5. And then the very next day, my wife's father died and left us $5 million. And this bothers the teacher. He cannot stand the thought of a fool inheriting or taking possession of all that he has worked so hard for. He can't stand it. He's used his wisdom, his knowledge. He's amassed an estate, and he's going to give it all up at death, and who knows what's coming next." He sees this as a great injustice. And then speaking of justice, in chapter 3, he says this. Verse 16, he said, "I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there, and in the place of justice, wickedness was there." He observes injustice. "And I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. But I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them, so that they may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return." So on one hand, the teacher says, I have this hope. Even when I see injustice in the world, I cling to this hope that God will judge the wicked. There is a time and place for judgment. But he knows that judgment has to occur before the wicked die, because he has no hope or expectation of any kind of judgment after death. And even if God does judge the wicked before they die, he recognizes that eventually the wicked are going to die. So say God judges the wicked and they're being punished and they're miserable because they've been wicked, well, then they die. And they're at rest. And they die just like the righteous die, who die just like the animals die. And again, he takes no comfort in the hope of any kind of post-mortem judgment. He's speaking these words hundreds of years, centuries before Jesus was raised from the dead. So the teacher is agnostic at best about the afterlife. That's true of a lot of figures in the Hebrew Scriptures, in what we call the Old Testament. He just doesn't know what happens after death. He's got no insight into it. All he can go on is what he observes under the sun, and as far as he knows, the dead are dead like Grover. They're dead all over. And it doesn't matter if you're righteous or if you're wicked. Everybody dies. One thing that does set apart human beings from the animals is that we are aware of our coming death. We know it's coming. We know that on a long enough timeline, the survival rate of every single one of us is 0. Not a single person in the room is getting out of this alive. Not a one of us. And the teacher knows this. And when he sees the way that death will negate all that he does in life, it torments him. He can't stand it. Psychologists would say that the teacher has a good old-fashioned case of neurotic death anxiety. He's dreading death. He's terrified of death. He hates death because he wants to live a life that matters. He wants to be remembered. He wants to leave a legacy behind that will last forever. He wants to be special, and he wants everyone to remember that he was special. But no matter how he slices it, he knows he's going to die. And he's already witnessed other special people being quickly forgotten after they die. And this leaves him distressed and depressed. And it all comes to a head in chapter 9 when he laments. In verse 2, he said, "All share a common destiny. The righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not." It does not matter if you're religious or irreligious. All share this common destiny. As it is with the good, so with the sinful. As it is with those who take oaths, so it is with those who are afraid to take them. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. That everyone dies. No matter who you are, no matter what you accomplish, no matter how you live, that everyone dies. The teacher said, this is the ultimate evil under the sun. This is what is wrong with life. Everyone dies. And then he observes at the end of verse 3, he says, the hearts of people, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live. And then afterward, they join the dead. See, he makes this connection between the evil of universal, indiscriminate death and the evil and the madness in the human heart. They feed off of one another. The evil of death leads to human beings doing evil in a world dominated by death. His problem is death. Death is his problem with everything about life. Death ruins everything, he says. Centuries later, the writer of Hebrews, when describing the work of Christ, will also describe how death not only encourages evil, but enslaves humanity to the forces of evil. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14 and 15. It says, Christ too shared in their humanity so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death. That is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. The writer of Hebrews says that Christ sets us free from the devil, from the evil one, from the forces of evil, by setting us free from our fear, our slavery to the fear of death, by setting us free from our death anxiety, by setting us free from that dark dread that death casts over all of us. Christ sets us free from that. And we now occupy a privileged place in history that the teacher did not, so that he, when he says these words and he laments death, he does not see that Jesus Christ and the life, death, and resurrection of Christ is the solution to the problem he's describing. He only sees the problem. We know something about life under the sun. We know something about the way the world works that the teacher does not. He knows the problem so well, he just can't see the ultimate solution to it. Yet still, he sees a ray of hope even for the living. We go back to chapter 9, verse 4. After lamenting death, he says in verse 4, anyone who is among the living has hope. He doesn't believe in the afterlife, doesn't believe in resurrection, but still the living have hope. Now here's the hope of the living. Even a live dog is better than a dead lion. Now that's quite a thing for him to say because dogs were despised, lions were regal. It's better to be alive and despised than to be regal and dead. So even if you're a live dog, that's better than being a dead lion. For the living know that they will die. This is hope. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. The teacher definitely stays on brand here. Even his hope comes with a bite or a sting. What is the hope of the living? The hope of the living is that we know we're going to die. And it's this knowledge of death, says the teacher, that motivates us to enjoy our blessings, to enjoy the gift of life while we still have the opportunity. Jesus' solution to death is a resurrection. Praise the Lord. Amen? This is the teacher's solution to the problem of death. He continues in verse 7. He says, this is it. This is what you do. You know you're going to die. So, go. Eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart. For God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Go, enjoy life with your wife or your husband, whom you love, all the days of this vaporous life that God has given you under the sun. All your vaporous days. For this is your lot in life and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. His solution to the problem of death is carpe diem. Seize the day. Make the most of whatever good God gives you in the present moment. Enjoy it, savor it, relish it, live within it before you die. Because the dead can no longer know or do or enjoy anything. Now, at this point, this is where our Christian impulse kicks in, And we hear what the teacher says, and we want to move on from it and emphasize the resurrection, the hope of the resurrection, because ultimately it's the resurrection that sets us free from the slavery of death. But I don't see the resurrection negating the teacher's advice here. If anything, the hope of the resurrection empowers us to sink deeper into the present moment and enjoy whatever good is coming our way right now, because whatever good we enjoy in this life before death is a gift from God. And the resurrection we enjoy in life after death is a gift from God. Why must we choose between the two? Why can't we enjoy both in their appropriate time? When Jesus says in John 10, I've come that they might have life and that they might have life to the full, he's not saying that full life begins after we die. He's saying that in him, full life begins right now before we die. What a shame it would be to use the hope of the resurrection, that we're going to start really living someday after we die, as an excuse to not fully suck the marrow out of this life right now and make the most of every good thing God gives us in the present moment. Back in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, the teacher says that God makes everything suitable or fitting or appropriate for its time. Everything has a time. And every season of life can teach us something. Every season of life has something to teach us, which is why I think he says in chapter 7, verse 2, it says it's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone, and the living should take this to heart. Funerals are instructive. Funerals increase our wisdom. The dead pay a price for the living to attend a funeral so that we can learn something, so that we can remember something, so that we can be reminded, in the words I've read from Shawshank Redemption, you can either get busy living or you can get busy dying. There's a time to be born and there's a time to die. And because of Jesus, there's a time to be raised from the dead. But now is not yet the time for resurrection. Now, for us, is the time to live. Living in the moment is a gift from God. That's why they call it the present. And the teacher says, there really is nothing better we can do under the sun. And he makes this point in a final, powerful way at the end of the book. What I think is the most moving passage in all of Ecclesiastes, and there are some beautiful passages in Ecclesiastes. This passage we're about to read, many scholars interpret it as an allegory, that the details we're going to read are symbolic of what happens as we age. We'll pick it up at the end of chapter 11 and take it into the first part of chapter 12. Here are the words of the teacher. You who are young, be happy while you are young. And let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Okay. So he's saying, don't be a fool. To the young who are living it up, live it up, enjoy it, make the most of the moment, but don't be a fool. Don't mess up your life. But don't use God's judgment as an excuse for not living either. There is a sense that God judges not only when we step out of line, but we come under the judgment of God when we don't fully live and enjoy what God has given us. So he says to the young, enjoy. It's a gift. And then he continues, so then banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are vapor. Anybody want to say amen to that? Vapor. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Remember that you are a created being. Remember that you have been given the gift of life. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain. When the keepers of the house tremble, when the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim. When the doors to the street are closed, the sound of grinding fades. When people rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint. When people are afraid of heights and of dangers in the street. When the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags itself along and desire is no longer stirred. Then people go to their eternal home and mourners go about the streets. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is severed and the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring and the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. That's some good Bible, isn't it? Remember your Creator when you were young. Don't you love that he doesn't define young? Remember your Creator when you're young. Make the most of that moment because it doesn't last. Enjoy being 20 years old. Oh my goodness, enjoy it. Because you will be able to do things and enjoy things when you are 20 that you will not be able to enjoy when you get old and turn 40. And enjoy every moment of being 40. Because you will do things at 40 that you won't be able to do when you're 60. And when you are 80 years young, make the most of whatever good God gives you in that season. Because you will be able to do things when you're 80 that you won't be able to do when you're 90 or when you're 100 or when you're dead. Seize the day. Make the most of the present moment, for it is a gift from God. I'll close with this parable. Let those who have ears to hear understand. Once upon a time, there was a monk who was being chased by a ferocious tiger. The monk ran to the edge of a cliff and he saw a rope hanging down over the cliff. The monk grabbed onto the rope and began to rappel down the side of the cliff. Relieved that he had escaped the tiger, he looked below him and he saw a huge grizzly bear at the bottom of the cliff waiting for him at the end of the rope. He looked up and he saw the tiger. He looked down and he saw the bear. And then he noticed just above him a couple of mice gnawing on the frayed edges of the rope. And he was contemplating what his next move was. And that's when he saw, growing on the side of the cliff within arm's reach, he saw a dark red strawberry. It was perfect. And he picked it and he ate it. And with juice running down his chin, the monk said to himself, That is the most delicious strawberry I have ever tasted in my life. Let's stand and sing.